In the vastness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists an unwritten law among the galaxy's most powerful species: never anger a human parent. The Zilithians learned this truth too late. What began as a routine slave raid on a human colony world would become the catalyst for the most devastating war the galaxy had ever witnessed. Because when alien overlords made the fatal mistake of stealing human children, they awakened something primal and terrifying in humanity, a protective fury that would burn across star systems and reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization. This is the story of how a mother's love became a weapon of mass destruction, and how the tears of stolen children ignited an inferno that consumed empires. Some mistakes can never be forgiven. Some lines should never be crossed. The Zilithians crossed every single one. The morning sun cast long shadows across the agricultural fields of New Eden, humanity's newest colony on the outer rim of explored space. Sarah Chan adjusted her wide-brimmed hat as she watched her 8-year-old daughter Maya chase butterflies through the corn stalks. The child's laughter echoed across the peaceful valley, mixing with the gentle hum of automated farming equipment and the distant calls of earthborn livestock that had adapted surprisingly well to this alien world. "Mama, look!" Maya called out, cupping her small hands around a creature that looked like a cross between a dragonfly and a hummingbird. Its iridescent wings shimmered in the alien sunlight, casting rainbow patterns across the girl's face. "It's so pretty," Sarah smiled, feeling the familiar warmth that came from seeing her daughter's wonder at their new world. 3 years ago, when the Colonial Authority had offered them a chance at a fresh start on New Eden, she had hesitated. David, her husband, had been enthusiastic about leaving behind the overcrowded cities of Earth, but Sarah worried about raising Maya so far from civilization. Now, watching her daughter thrive in this peaceful paradise, she knew they had made the right choice. The sound of approaching footsteps made her turn. David emerged from behind a storage shed, his clothes dusty from morning repairs to their harvesting drone. His weathered face broke into a grin when he saw Maya still playing with the local wildlife. "That girl's going to try to adopt every creature on this planet," he said, wrapping his arms around Sarah's waist from behind. "Yesterday, I caught her trying to bring home one of those 6-legged rabbit things." "She has a good heart," Sarah replied, leaning back against his chest. "Too good for this harsh universe, sometimes." David kissed the top of her head. "That's what we're here for, to make sure she never has to see how harsh it can be." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Sarah felt it in her bones before she heard it, a vibration that made the windows of their farmhouse rattle. Maya stopped playing and looked up at the sky, her young face creasing with confusion. "What's that sound, Mama?" Sarah shaded her eyes and squinted upward. At first, she saw nothing but the familiar pale blue sky of New Eden. Then, like storm clouds gathering with impossible speed, dark shapes began to emerge from the atmosphere. They were massive, easily the size of city blocks, their surfaces reflecting the sunlight in ways that hurt to look at directly. "David," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with growing fear. "Those aren't human ships." David's arms tightened around her. In the 3 years since humanity had begun expanding beyond their home system, they had encountered exactly 0 intelligent alien species. The galaxy seemed empty of other civilizations, filled with worlds ripe for colonization, but devoid of the builders who might have claimed them first. The appearance of obviously artificial structures in their sky meant everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe was wrong. "Mama, I'm scared," Maya said, dropping the butterfly-like creature and running back to her parents. Sarah scooped her daughter into her arms, feeling the child's small body trembling. The alien ships descended with an eerie silence that made their massive size even more intimidating. Sarah counted at least 20 of them, each one casting shadows that turned day to twilight across the valley. As they grew closer, details became visible on their hulls, symbols that definitely weren't human, surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and appendages that looked disturbingly organic. "We need to get to the emergency shelter," David said, his voice steady despite the fear Sarah could see in his eyes. Now, they had built the shelter as a precaution against meteor strikes and solar flares, never imagining they might need it for protection against alien visitors. As they ran toward the reinforced bunker behind their house, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe these aliens were peaceful explorers, just as surprised to find humans here as the humans would see them. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved with careful diplomacy. Those hopes died when the ships opened fire. The first energy beams struck the colony's central administration building, turning concrete and steel into a cloud of superheated vapor. The sound of the explosion reached them a moment later, a thunderclap that knocked them to the ground and left Sarah's ears ringing. Maya screamed, burying her face against her mother's shoulder. More beams lanced down from the alien ships, systematically destroying every building in the colony center. The community school where Maya would have started advanced classes next month vanished in a flash of blue-white light. The medical facility where Dr. Hernandez had delivered 3 babies just last week became a smoking crater. The communications array that connected New Eden to the rest of human space died, with a shower of sparks that painted the sky orange. "They're not trying to capture the colony," David shouted over the noise of destruction. "They're sterilizing it." Sarah's blood turned to ice. If the aliens were simply destroying everything, why use such precise weapons? Why not just drop bombs or use nuclear weapons to wipe out the entire settlement at once? Unless... "The people," she breathed. "They want the people." As if summoned by her words, smaller craft began detaching from the massive ships overhead. These vessels moved differently than the larger ones, with a fluid grace that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of predatory birds. They swept down toward the scattered farmsteads and residential areas where families would be hiding, their movements coordinated with military precision. David grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her toward the shelter. "Come on, we can still make it." They were 50 meters from safety when the ground in front of them erupted. Soil and rock flew through the air as something massive burst from beneath the surface. Sarah's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. It looked like a mechanical mole the size of a subway car, its drill-tipped nose still spinning as it oriented itself toward them. The machine's sides opened like flower petals, revealing an interior filled with what could only be restraints designed for human-sized prisoners. Standing inside were 3 figures that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. They were humanoid, but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, with joints that bent in impossible directions. Their skin had a translucent quality that revealed the dark fluid moving through their veins. But it was their eyes that truly terrified her, black orbs that reflected light like oil, showing no emotion, no recognition of her humanity. "Mama!" Maya screamed as one of the creatures lunged forward with inhuman speed. David threw himself between the alien and his family, his fists raised in a futile gesture of defiance. The creature barely seemed to notice him. A casual backhand sent him flying through the air to crash against their farmhouse wall with a sickening thud. He slumped to the ground and didn't move. "David!" Sarah's scream was raw with anguish. She tried to run to him, but cold hands seized her arms. The alien's touch burned like ice through her clothing, and she could smell something acrid and chemical on its breath. "Let go of my mama!" Maya's small fists pounded against the creature holding Sarah, her child's fury both heartbreaking and useless against their captors. The third alien produced a device that looked like a crystalline cage. With movements too quick to follow, it snapped the contraption around Maya's head. The child's struggles stopped immediately, her eyes becoming vacant and distant. "What did you do to her?" Sarah fought against her captor's grip with desperate strength. "Maya, Maya, answer me." Her daughter turned toward her with glassy eyes. When she spoke, her voice was flat and emotionless, as if coming from very far away. Compliance achieved. Subject ready for transport. Sarah felt something die inside her chest. Whatever they had done to Maya, It was worse than simple unconsciousness. They had stolen her daughter's spirit, leaving behind an empty shell that wore her baby's face. The creatures dragged them toward the mechanical transport. As they approached, Sarah could see inside the restraint chamber. It was designed to hold dozens of people, with separate sections clearly meant for adults and children. The implications made her stomach turn. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How many colonies?" The alien holding her paused, its oil-dark eyes studying her face. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding glass, speaking perfect English with no accent at all. Query irrelevant. Human breeding populations will be optimized for maximum efficiency. Breeding populations. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. These creatures weren't just raiding one colony. They were harvesting humans across multiple worlds. And children like Maya weren't just prisoners. They were breeding stock for some unimaginable purpose. As they reached the transport, Sarah caught sight of movement near their farmhouse. David was pulling himself to his feet, blood streaming down his face, but his eyes blazing with fury. He had managed to reach their emergency communicator, a quantum entanglement device that could send messages instantaneously across galactic distances. Their eyes met across the devastated landscape. David's lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear over the sound of alien machinery. But she could read them clearly. "I love you. I'll find you." The alien holding Maya noticed David's movement. It raised a weapon that looked like an organic pistol, its barrel pulsing with internal light. "No." Sarah's scream was lost in the sound of energy discharge. But David was already falling forward, his finger slamming down on the communicator's emergency broadcast button. The device flared with brilliant white light as it transmitted everything its sensors had recorded: the alien ships, the attack, the kidnapping, and, most importantly, clear images of the creatures responsible. The message would reach Earth in minutes. The Colonial Authority would know what had happened here. And if Sarah knew anything about human nature, she knew this would not stand. The alien looked down at David's still form, then back at Sarah. Irrelevant gesture. Human resistance capabilities have been analyzed and found insufficient. Sarah was pushed into the restraint chamber, the mechanical bindings closing around her wrists and ankles with cold efficiency. Through the transport's transparent walls, she watched their farmhouse burn, watched the life they had built turn to ash and smoke. But as the machine began to descend back into its tunnel, carrying them away from everything they had known, Sarah felt something growing inside her chest. Not despair, though that was there too. Not fear, though terror flowed through her veins like poison. Rage. These creatures had made a fundamental error in their calculations about human resistance capabilities. They had stolen children. They had torn families apart. They had committed the one act that would unite humanity regardless of politics, nationality, or personal differences. They had declared war on human parents. As the transport disappeared underground and began its journey to whatever hellish destination awaited them, Sarah held onto that rage like a lifeline. She would survive whatever they planned for her and Maya. She would find a way to resist, to fight back, to make them pay for every tear her daughter had shed. And somewhere behind them, David's message was already racing across the stars, carrying news of humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. The news that first contact had come in the form of slavers who targeted children. The galaxy was about to learn why disturbing a human family was considered the most dangerous mistake an intelligent species could make. But first, Sarah had to survive what was coming. As darkness closed around their transport and alien voices spoke in incomprehensible languages about quotas and breeding schedules, she pressed her face against the restraints and whispered a promise into the darkness. "I'm coming for you, Maya. Mama's coming for you. And I'm bringing all of humanity with me." The transport plunged deeper into alien tunnels, carrying away the survivors of New Eden's first day as a conquered world. But it also carried something the invaders hadn't planned for: the fury of a mother who would never stop fighting to save her child. Above them, the alien fleet began its departure, satisfied with the harvest. They had taken everything of value from this human colony and eliminated all resistance. According to their calculations, it would be decades before the humans could mount any meaningful response to their raids. They had never encountered a species that went to war over emotional attachments. They were about to learn the most important lesson in galactic history. Never underestimate what humans will do for their children. Admiral Rebecca Torres was reviewing supply requisitions in her office aboard the battleship Indomitable when the quantum communicator began screaming. The shrill alarm that filled her quarters was one she had hoped never to hear during her 30-year military career. The sound of an emergency distress signal from the outer colonies. She was on her feet and, moving before the alarm finished its first cycle, her coffee mug forgotten as it shattered against the deck. The communicator's holographic display was already materializing as she reached it, showing the standard Colonial Authority emergency broadcast header. But as the message began to play, Rebecca felt her blood turn to ice. David Chin's battered face appeared in the hologram, blood streaming from a head wound as explosions lit the sky behind him. His voice was steady despite the chaos, speaking with the calm precision of someone who knew he might only get one chance to warn the rest of humanity. This is David Chun, colonist registration Delta 774, New Eden Settlement. We are under attack by unknown alien forces. They're taking prisoners, targeting civilians, prioritizing children for capture. Ships are massive, technology far beyond ours. They're not interested in negotiation or conquest. This is a harvesting operation. The image shook as another explosion rocked the area around him. Rebecca could hear a woman screaming in the background, and the sound made her stomach clench. The aliens are humanoid, but clearly non-human. Estimated height 2.5 meters, translucent skin, black eyes. They have some kind of mind control technology. They use it on my daughter. Ships show biotechnology integration, possibly living vessels. My wife and daughter are being taken. I repeat, they are prioritizing children for capture. David's voice cracked on the last words, but he forced himself to continue. If anyone receives this message, you need to know, they called us breeding populations. This isn't first contact. This is livestock management. Tell Admiral Torres that her worst nightmares about alien contact were optimistic. Tell her they took Sarah and Maya, and she'll know what that means. Tell her the transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static that gradually faded to silence. Rebecca stared at the empty hologram projector for a long moment, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. Sarah and Maya Chun, David's wife and daughter. She remembered them from the colony application files, remembered Sarah's bright smile in the family photo, and Maya's gap-toothed grin. Admiral, her aide, Lieutenant Commander Park, appeared in the doorway with a data pad clutched in his hands. His usually composed face was pale with shock. Ma'am, we're receiving similar distress signals from 17 other colony worlds, all outer rim settlements, all reporting the same type of attack. Rebecca's composure cracked. 17 colonies, thousands of families, children taken for purposes that made her soul recoil. She had spent decades preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact, but even her darkest scenarios hadn't included systematic kidnapping operations targeting human children. Give me a connection to Earth Command, she said, her voice deadly calm. Priority Alpha emergency protocols. And signal the fleet. All ships to battle stations immediately. Park hesitated. Ma'am, the fleet is currently scattered across 6 systems on patrol duties. It would take weeks to gather our full strength. Then, we'll start with what we have. Rebecca was already moving toward her combat armor, her mind shifting into the tactical mode that had made her the youngest admiral in Colonial Defense Force history. Send emergency recall signals to every CDF ship in human space. I want battle groups forming within 72 hours. As Park hurried to carry out her orders, Rebecca sealed herself into her combat suit and tried to push down the rage building in her chest. She had known David and Sarah Chun personally. They had served under her command during the Titan mining conflicts before retiring to civilian life. Maya was one of dozens of colony children she had met during inspection tours, bright young minds representing humanity's future among the stars. And now aliens had taken them, had stolen them for purposes that made her skin crawl. The phrase breeding populations echoed in her mind like a poison, each repetition stoking the fury burning inside her. The bridge of the Indomitable was controlled chaos when she arrived. Officers worked with desperate efficiency, coordinating rescue operations for the attack colonies while simultaneously preparing for what everyone knew was coming. Admiral Torres took her position at the command center, her presence immediately focusing the activity around her. "Report," she ordered. Commander Singh, her tactical officer, looked up from his displays with grim determination. 17 confirmed attacks, ma'am. All outer rim colonies, all following the same pattern. Orbital bombardment to eliminate defenses, followed by precision raids to capture civilians. Every colony reports the same priority targets: children and young adults. Casualties. Initial reports suggest they're minimizing human deaths. Anyone who doesn't resist is being taken alive. Those who fight back. Singh's jaw tightened. The aliens don't seem interested in prisoners who won't cooperate quietly. Rebecca studied the tactical display, showing the locations of the attack colonies. The pattern was clear. The aliens had hit humanity's most vulnerable settlements, places far from military protection where families had gone to build new lives. Places where children played in alien sunshine while their parents dreamed of better futures. Estimated prisoner count. Preliminary numbers suggest approximately 40,000 civilians taken across all attacks, ma'am. Roughly 60% of them children under the age of 16. 40,000. Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those numbers. 40,000 people who had trusted humanity's military to protect them. 40,000 faces she would never be able to forget, no matter how many aliens she killed in the coming war. Communications from Earth Command coming through now. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Hayes from the communication station. Secretary General Morrison is requesting immediate video conference. The main display shifted to show the emergency session of the Earth Unified Council. Rebecca recognized faces from around the globe, military leaders, politicians, and scientific advisors all gathered in humanity's war room. Secretary General Morrison's usually calm expression was tight, with barely controlled fury. Admiral Torres. Morrison began without preamble. "We've reviewed the distress signals. This is clearly an act of war against humanity. The Council has authorized immediate military response under Article 7 of the Colonial Defense Charter." "Understood, sir. I'm already recalling the fleet." "Rebecca." The Secretary General's voice softened slightly, using her first name in a way that reminded her they had known each other for decades. "We both know what this means. First contact with hostile aliens who are specifically targeting our children. Public reaction when this gets out will be explosive," Rebecca finished. "Sir, I need to know, are we treating this as a rescue operation or a war of extermination?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Around him, Rebecca could see other council members engaged in heated discussions, their voices rising as they debated humanity's response. Finally, the Secretary General looked directly into the camera. "Admiral, you have full authorization to use any means necessary to recover our people and eliminate this threat. If that means burning their worlds to ash, then we'll worry about the moral implications after we get our children back." The connection ended, leaving Rebecca staring at a blank screen. Around her, the bridge crew continued their work with grim efficiency, but she could see the same cold rage in their eyes that she felt burning in her own chest. Every person on this ship understood what they were facing. Every parent in the Colonial Defense Force would feel the same fury that was consuming her now. "Ma'am," Commander Singh called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the battleship Retribution. Admiral Chun requesting permission to speak with you directly." Rebecca's blood chilled. Admiral Marcus Chun, David's older brother, commanded the Third Fleet from his flagship. If he had received news about his brother's family, Marcus Chen's face appeared on her personal communication screen, and Rebecca could see decades of military discipline barely containing volcanic rage. His voice was steady when he spoke, but she could hear the fury underneath. Rebecca, I assume you've seen the recordings from New Eden. I have, Marcus. I'm sorry about David and his family. Don't be sorry yet. We're going to get them back. His eyes hardened. All of them. I'm bringing the Third Fleet to rendezvous with your forces. Full battle configuration. Marcus, you need to think clearly about this. Personal involvement in a mission like this. Personal. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rebecca, they took human children for breeding stock. Every parent in the Colonial Defense Force is going to consider this personal. Every single one of us is going to want alien blood for what they've done. He was right, and Rebecca knew it. Word of the attacks was already spreading through the fleet communication networks. Reports were coming in of spontaneous crew meetings of off-duty personnel requesting immediate return to active status, of retirement-age veterans trying to rejoin the service. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their target selection. They had united humanity in a way that nothing else ever could. How long until your fleet can reach the outer rim? Rebecca asked. 72 hours if we push the engines hard. But, Rebecca, I need to tell you something else. My intelligence officer has been analyzing the attack patterns, and she thinks she knows where they're taking our people. Rebecca leaned forward. Go on. The alien ships didn't just disappear after the attacks. Our long-range sensors track their departure vectors. They're all heading toward the same general region of space, an area about 200 light-years beyond our furthest colonies, completely unexplored by human ships. Their home system? Unknown. But wherever they're going, they're taking 40,000 humans with them, including children who are probably terrified out of their minds right now. The image of Maya Chen's frightened face flashed through Rebecca's mind. 8 years old, probably crying for her parents in some alien prison. Multiply that by thousands of other children, and the magnitude of this atrocity became clear. Marcus, I want you to coordinate with Earth Command on fleet positioning. I'm taking a fast reconnaissance force ahead to track the alien ships and gather intelligence. If we're going to mount a rescue operation, we need to know what we're up against. Understood. Rebecca. Marcus paused, his expression softening slightly. When we find these things, when we rescue our people, what happens to the aliens who did this? Rebecca looked around her bridge at the faces of officers who had dedicated their lives to protecting human colonies. She thought about 40,000 civilians being carried away to face unimaginable horrors. She thought about children being taken from their parents for purposes that made her soul recoil. Marcus, when this is over, there won't be enough left of their species to remember why they thought enslaving human children was a good idea. The communication ended, leaving Rebecca alone with her thoughts. Around her, the Indomitable thrummed with activity as her crew prepared for war. In the distance, she could see other ships of her fleet changing course to join them, their running lights like stars gathering for battle. But even as she planned the military response, Rebecca couldn't stop thinking about the recordings from New Eden, about David Chen's desperate message and his wife's screams in the background, about Maya Chen and thousands of other children facing horrors beyond imagination. The aliens had chosen to make humanity's children their target. They had selected the one thing that would guarantee absolute, implacable retaliation from every human military force in the galaxy. They were about to learn the hardest lesson in galactic history. When you threaten human children, you don't just fight human soldiers. You fight human parents. And human parents don't stop, don't negotiate, and don't show mercy until their children are safe. Rebecca Torres had spent her entire career preparing for war. But this wouldn't be war as she had understood it. This would be extermination. As the Indomitable and her escort ships accelerated toward the outer rim, Rebecca made a silent promise to every child taken in the raids. She would find them. She would bring them home. And she would make absolutely certain that no alien species would ever again consider human children acceptable targets. The galaxy was about to witness the birth of humanity's true nature. Not the peaceful explorers and colonists the aliens had encountered on defenseless worlds, but the apex predators who had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain through millions of years of evolution. The hunt was about to begin. Deep in the bowels of the alien vessel designated Harvester Prime, Sarah Chun cradled her daughter's empty shell and planned murder. 3 days had passed since their capture on New Eden. 3 days of traveling through space in cramped holding cells while alien voices discussed humans like livestock. 3 days of watching her daughter stare at nothing with vacant eyes, responding only to simple commands issued by their captors. The holding area was a nightmare of efficient design. Hundreds of humans were secured in restraint pods that kept them alive while preventing escape. The aliens had separated families systematically, adults in one section, children in another, teenagers in a third area that Sarah didn't want to think about. Only she and Maya remained together, apparently because the aliens found her daughter's condition somehow interesting. "Mama," Maya said in that flat, emotionless voice that broke Sarah's heart every time she heard it. "I'm Festi." Sarah used her limited mobility to activate the water dispenser built into Maya's restraint pod. The device was obviously designed for human physiology, which meant these aliens had been studying humanity for much longer than anyone had realized. They knew exactly what humans needed to survive, how to keep them healthy during transport, even how to accommodate basic biological functions with minimal dignity. "Thank you," Maya continued in the same monotone. Hydration levels satisfactory. It was the voice of her daughter, speaking words no 8-year-old should know, programmed responses that proved something terrible had been done to the child's mind. Sarah had tested the limits of the mind control device repeatedly over the past 3 days, searching for any crack in its influence, any sign that her real daughter was still there underneath the alien conditioning. So far, she had found nothing. But Sarah Chun had been a colonial marine before becoming a farmer. She had fought in 3 separate conflicts, earned a citation for tactical innovation, and learned survival techniques that most civilians never imagined. The aliens might have superior technology, but they had made a crucial mistake in assuming that all human colonies were defended only by peaceful farmers. They had no idea what they had captured. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. 2 of the tall aliens moved through the holding area with their typical eerie grace, their black eyes scanning the human prisoners with calculating coldness. One of them stopped in front of Sarah's restraint pod, studying her with the same intensity she might use to examine an interesting insect. "Subject designation, Chinceradult," the creature said in its grinding voice. "Unusual stress patterns detected. Elaborate." Sarah met its alien gaze with steady hatred. "I want my daughter back." Clarification: offspring entity remains in optimal condition. Current location is adjacent restraint pod. "That's not my daughter anymore. That's what you've turned her into." The alien tilted its head at an angle that would have broken human bones. Emotional attachment patterns continue despite neural modification of offspring. Fascinating. Additional study required. It produced a device that looked like a crystalline scanner and began running it over Sarah's restraint pod. The readings it displayed meant nothing to her, but the alien's reaction was definitely one of interest. Subject shows elevated adrenaline, increased neural activity in regions associated with aggression planning, and chemical markers indicating preparation for violence despite current restraints. How does subject intend to implement aggressive intentions while secured? Sarah smiled, and something in her expression made the alien take a step backward. "You'll find out." Threat assessment updated. Additional restraints recommended. The second alien joined its companion, both of them now studying Sarah with obvious concern. She could hear them communicating in their own language, a series of clicks and harmonics that sounded like breaking glass. After several minutes, they seemed to reach a decision. Subject Chinceradult will be transferred to isolation containment. Potential for violent disruption deemed unacceptable. "Good," Sarah said as they began unlocking her restraint pod. "That makes what I'm planning much easier." The aliens paused, clearly processing her words. Their threat assessment protocols were obviously sophisticated, but they were having trouble categorizing her behavior. She was secured, weaponless, surrounded by technology far beyond human capabilities, yet she continued to speak as though she held some advantage in the situation. As they lifted her from the restraint pod, Sarah caught a glimpse of the holding area's full scope. Hundreds of humans in neat rows, all secured, all helpless. Men and women from 17 different colonies, representing thousands of families torn apart by alien raiders. Children crying for parents they would never see again. Parents staring into space with the same broken expression she felt on her own face. But she also saw something the aliens might have missed. She saw the way some of the adults watched their captors, memorizing movement patterns and security procedures. She saw the way former soldiers automatically categorized potential weapons and escape routes. She saw the cold calculation in eyes that belonged to people who had survived on frontier worlds where weakness meant death. The aliens had captured humans, but they hadn't captured sheep. The isolation cell was smaller than the group holding area, but more sophisticated in its restraint systems. Sarah found herself secured to a surface that adjusted constantly to prevent her from gaining any leverage or mobility. Sensors covered every surface, obviously monitoring her vital signs and behavior patterns. Even the air circulation seemed designed to keep her slightly drowsy, though her military training had taught her how to fight off chemical sedation. Hours passed in silence. Sarah used the time to test every millimeter of her prison, mapping its responses and limitations. The aliens were clearly experienced at containing hostile prisoners, but their systems were designed for species they had encountered before. They had made assumptions about human capabilities that might not be entirely accurate. The sound of the cell door opening made her look up. A new alien entered, different from the others she had seen. This one was smaller, with skin that showed more color variation, and its movements suggested higher intelligence or authority. When it spoke, its voice had a different quality, less mechanical, more organic. Subject: Chun Seradult. I am designate Zythok, responsible for biological assessment of captured specimens. Your behavioral patterns require explanation. Let me guess, Sarah replied. You can't figure out why I'm not broken yet. Accurate assessment. Previous encounters with similar species have established predictable psychological responses to capture and containment. Your continued resistance indicates either unknown physiological traits or psychological conditioning beyond our current models. Sarah laughed, a sound that made the alien flinch. You want to know what's different about me? I'm a mother, and someone took my child. Parental attachment responses have been documented in multiple species. Typically, removal of offspring results in temporary emotional distress, followed by acceptance and compliance. Your readings suggest escalating rather than diminishing hostility. Then, your documentation is incomplete. Zythok moved closer, its scanner devices already active. Elaborate. What aspect of human parental attachment has our research failed to identify? Sarah stared at the creature with pure hatred. You took children. Human children. Do you have any idea what that means? Children represent future breeding potential. Removal from family units allows for optimized conditioning and integration into productive roles. You stupid bastard, Sarah whispered. You don't understand at all. Human parents don't just protect their own children. They protect all children. Every human military force in the galaxy is coming for you now, and they won't stop until every single child is recovered or your entire species is dead. The alien scanner beeped insistently, and Zythok studied the readings with obvious confusion. Biometric analysis indicates absolute certainty in your statements. You genuinely believe rescue operations will be attempted despite the tactical impossibility of success. Not attempted, guaranteed. Explanation. Current human space fleet consists of approximately 200 combat vessels scattered across multiple systems. Our harvesting fleet alone contains over 8,000 ships, with full technological superiority. Military resistance is mathematically impossible. Sarah's smile was predatory. You counted ships. You should have counted parents. Clarification required. Every human in your fleet who has children on Earth will come looking for ours. Every parent in the Colonial Defense Force will volunteer for suicide missions to get these kids back. Every mother and father in human space will consider this a personal attack on their own family. You didn't just attack 17 colonies. You declared war on human parenthood. Zythok scanners were working frantically now, trying to process readings that clearly didn't match their established psychological profiles. Mathematical analysis suggests emotional responses cannot overcome technological disadvantages. You're about to learn something about human mathematics, Sarah said. We don't calculate odds when our children are in danger. We calculate body counts. The alien was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with data that didn't fit its species' understanding of rational behavior. Finally, it spoke again, and Sarah detected something that might have been uncertainty in its voice. Subject: Chinsaradult. What would constitute acceptable resolution to current situation? Return every human child you've taken. Leave human space and never come back. Submit your entire military command structure for trial and execution. Terms are unacceptable. Alternative solutions must be identified. Sarah's laugh was cold as space. Those aren't terms. Those are predictions. The interrogation continued for hours, with Zythok trying desperately to understand how human parents could maintain absolute confidence in rescue when facing impossible odds. But Sarah could see doubt creeping into the aliens' behavior, uncertainty about whether their species really understood the creatures they had chosen to enslave. Meanwhile, far above them in the command sections of Harvester Prime, other aliens were beginning to receive reports that supported Sarah's predictions. Long-range sensors were detecting massive movement in human space, entire fleets abandoning their patrol routes and converging on the outer rim. Communication intercepts suggested full military mobilization on a scale never before documented. The humans were coming. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical display that showed the largest military force in human history. 68 warships from across human space had abandoned their posts and converged on her position, their commanders united by single-minded fury. The ships represented every major military organization in human space: Colonial Defense Force, Earth System Navy, Frontier Security Service, and even several corporate security fleets whose crews included parents. Final ship status report, Admiral, Commander Singh announced. All vessels ready for acceleration to pursuit coordinates. Rebecca nodded, her eyes fixed on the display showing the alien ship's projected course. They were heading toward a region of space that human explorers had never visited, probably their home system or a major base. It didn't matter. Wherever they had taken humanity's children, that's where this fleet was going. Admiral Chun, reporting ready for pursuit operations, came Marcus Chen's voice over the fleet communication channel. His third fleet had integrated seamlessly with her forces, adding another 20 ships to their growing armada. Admiral Morrison, second fleet ready, came another voice. 41 ships at full combat status. The reports continued as fleet commanders across human space confirmed their readiness. Rebecca had never seen military cooperation like this, political and organizational differences swept aside by shared rage over captured children. Enemy nations had offered to share intelligence. Rival corporations had pooled resources, and retired veterans had begged to return to service. The aliens had united humanity in a way that centuries of diplomacy had never achieved. All ships, this is Admiral Torres, Rebecca announced across the fleet channel. We are departing immediately for the recovery of our civilians. I want every crew member to understand, we are not just conducting a rescue operation. We are teaching the galaxy that human children are not acceptable targets for any species, anywhere, ever. The acknowledgments came back from 68 ships, representing the largest human military force ever assembled. As they accelerated toward alien space, Rebecca thought about Sarah and Maya Chun, about 40,000 humans facing unimaginable horrors, about the message this mission would send to any other species that might be watching. Earth's children were coming home, and Anyone standing in the way was about to learn why humanity had earned its place among the stars through conquest rather than invitation. The hunt had begun, and it would not end until every human child was safe or every alien ship was burning debris in the void. The Zilithian High Command Center on Kethmore Prime was a monument to 1,000 years of galactic dominance. Crystalline spires reached toward the alien sky, their surfaces pulsing with the accumulated knowledge of countless conquered species. Within these towers, the most powerful beings in known space made decisions that affected the fate of entire civilizations. Today, those beings were experiencing something completely foreign to their nature: doubt. Supreme Commander Veltar stood before the massive tactical display, his elongated form rigid with barely contained anxiety. Around him, the High Command's greatest military minds studied sensor readings that defied everything they thought they knew about the primitive species they had harvested. Report from Designate Zythok on the human specimens, announced Intelligence Overseer Cresthull, her voice carrying undertones that indicated deep concern. Psychological evaluation has revealed unexpected behavioral patterns. The humans display irrational confidence in rescue operations despite overwhelming tactical disadvantages. Veltar's black eyes fixed on the data streams flowing across the display. Elaborate. What form does this irrationality take? The subjects insist their military forces will attempt recovery operations regardless of cost or probability of success. They claim emotional attachment to offspring overrides logical threat assessment. Most disturbing, biological monitors confirm absolute conviction in these statements. Emotional irrationality is common among inferior species, interjected War Leader Nexthal. Their primitive attachment responses will fade once they realize the futility of resistance. Cresthull's tentacles rippled with disagreement. Negative, War Leader. Our xenopsychology department has never encountered this specific pattern. The human specimens appear to believe their species will treat this as an existential threat rather than a territorial dispute. The display suddenly flashed with new information. Fleet Coordinator Zeth Khan's voice filled the chamber, tight with something approaching alarm. Supreme Commander, we are receiving multiple reports from our outer sensor arrays. Human vessel movements detected across 17 star systems. Veltar moved to the strategic overview, his confidence beginning to erode. Clarification. How many human vessels? Current count stands at 68 confirmed warships, Supreme Commander. All units appear to be converging on our Harvest Fleet's return vector. 68 ships. Veltar felt something cold settle in his chest cavity. According to their intelligence assessments, the entire human space fleet consisted of fewer than 200 combat vessels. If 68 were already moving toward their territory, it represented a military commitment far beyond what any rational species would risk for a simple rescue operation. War Leader Nexthal, your assessment of human military capabilities? The war leader's form expanded slightly, a display of confidence that didn't match the uncertainty in his voice. Human technology is primitive, Supreme Commander. Their vessels lack gravitic shields, quantum targeting systems, and bioadaptive hulls. A single harvester ship could eliminate multiple human vessels without difficulty. Then, explain why 68 of their warships are pursuing our harvest fleet. Desperation, Supreme Commander. They are operating on emotional rather than logical imperatives. They will approach, realize the impossibility of their situation, and withdraw to avoid total fleet destruction. But even as Nexthal spoke, new data was flowing into the command center. Long-range sensor readings showed the human fleet wasn't approaching cautiously like a reconnaissance force. They were accelerating aggressively, their formation suggesting preparation for immediate combat rather than negotiation or tactical assessment. Supreme Commander, Cresthull interjected, I recommend immediate consultation with our xenopsychology specialists. Human behavioral patterns are diverging significantly from our established models. The specialists arrived within minutes, their forms smaller and more delicate than the military commanders. Lead analyst Youthmech moved directly to the data feeds, her advanced neural implants interfacing with the command systems to review everything they knew about human psychology. Supreme Commander, we have identified a critical gap in our understanding of human social structures, Youthmech announced after several minutes of analysis. Our research focused on individual human responses to stress and capture. We failed to adequately model their collective behavior patterns when offspring are threatened. Explain. Humans appear to form what our translation matrices render as pack bonds that extend beyond immediate genetic relationships. Attack on any human offspring triggers protective responses throughout their entire social network. Their approaching fleet likely contains individuals who have no direct genetic connection to the captured specimens, but who nonetheless consider them worthy of ultimate sacrifice. Veltar felt his confidence eroding further. You're suggesting they will engage in suicidal combat to protect unrelated offspring? Affirmative, Supreme Commander. Moreover, human military doctrine appears to incorporate this psychological trait as a tactical advantage. Their combat effectiveness may actually increase when fighting to protect offspring, creating Berserker State warriors who ignore normal self-preservation instincts. War leader Nexthal's contemptuous gesture indicated his disagreement. Ridiculous. No species evolves suicidal tendencies as survival traits. Negative, war leader. Suicidal defense of offspring is documented in over 3,000 species across the galaxy. What makes humans unique is their willingness to extend this behavior to unrelated members of their own species. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zilithians had built their empire by understanding the psychological weak points of other species, exploiting fear and self-interest to prevent unified resistance. They had never encountered a species that became more dangerous when their offspring were threatened. Fleet Coordinator Veltar commanded, "Contact Harvest Commander Kelnoth aboard the lead harvester. I want immediate updates on human prisoner status and any changes in their behavior." The communication link established quickly, revealing the agitated form of Kelnoth on the main display. The Harvest Commander's usual composure was notably absent, replaced by what appeared to be genuine concern. "Supreme Commander, we have experienced multiple incidents with human prisoners. They are attempting coordinated resistance despite neural suppression protocols." Elaborate. The adult specimens have been sharing information through covert signaling systems we failed to detect initially. They're teaching each other our security procedures, guard rotations, and facility layouts. Most disturbing, they appear to be organizing some form of group action. Veltar's appendages tighten with anxiety. Are the neural suppression devices malfunctioning? Negative, Supreme Commander. The devices function normally on individual humans. However, the humans seem to retain more cognitive function when in groups, as though they share mental processing load between individuals. In the High Command Chamber, lead analyst Youthmech's tentacles writhed with excitement as she processed this information. "Supreme Commander, this suggests a form of collective intelligence we have never documented. Individual human neural suppression may be insufficient when multiple specimens are contained together. Recommended solution? Complete isolation of all specimens, or..." Youthmech paused, clearly reluctant to voice her conclusion. "Or elimination of specimens before collective intelligence reaches critical threshold." The suggestion sent ripples of concern through the command center. The Zilithians had built their harvesting operations around keeping specimens alive for optimal processing and integration. Mass elimination would represent complete failure of their standard protocols. Fleet Coordinator, what is current distance to human pursuit fleet? 18 hours at current closing velocity, Supreme Commander. However, our sensor analysis suggests human ships are operating beyond normal safety parameters. They appear to be overloading their propulsion systems to achieve maximum acceleration, meaning they are accepting significant risk of engine failure or catastrophic system damage to reduce interception time. This behavior pattern does not match our models of rational military doctrine. Veltar studied the tactical display, watching the approaching human fleet with growing unease. Everything about their behavior contradicted Zilithian understanding of logical military action. They were risking their entire space fleet on what should have been an impossible rescue mission. They were pursuing a force that outnumbered them more than 100-to-1. They were operating their ships beyond safe parameters, accepting crippling damage to their own vessels to reach the battlefield faster. It was the behavior of predators, not prey. Supreme Commander, came Kelnotha's voice from the Harvester fleet. We are receiving communication attempts from the approaching human vessels. Audio only. Do not respond. The bridge fell silent as human voices filled the chamber. The transmission was being broadcast on all frequencies, clearly intended for the Zilithian fleet to hear. Alien vessels, this is Admiral Rebecca Torres, Colonial Defense Force. You are carrying stolen human civilians, including children. Release them immediately and surrender for trial or face the consequences. The voice was steady, controlled, carrying absolute conviction that made several Zilithian commanders shift uncomfortably. But it was the next transmission that truly chilled the high command. This is Admiral Marcus Chun, speaking for every parent in human space. You took our children. We are coming to get them back. Every ship in this fleet contains mothers and fathers who will die before letting you keep our young ones. You have 18 hours to consider whether your species wants to find out what human parents are capable of when their children are in danger. The transmission ended, leaving the High Command in stunned silence. Veltar found himself studying the approaching fleet with new understanding. Those 68 ships didn't represent a military force conducting a rescue operation. They represented an entire species' parental fury condensed into weapons and engines and given a single purpose: kill anything that threatened their offspring. War Leader Nexthal, reevaluate combat projections, accounting for berserker psychological states among human crews. The War Leader's confidence was visibly diminishing as he processed the new parameters. Supreme Commander, if human crews ignore damage control protocols and continue fighting until ship destruction, our victory margins decrease significantly. Estimated casualties among our forces increase to 30% of engaged vessels. 30% casualties to defeat a force that should have been eliminated without losses. Veltar felt the foundation of Zilithian military doctrine crumbling beneath him. Fleet Coordinator, signal all Harvester ships. Prepare for immediate acceleration to maximum velocity. We return to Zilithian space immediately. Supreme Commander, our engines are not designed for the stress levels required to outrun pursuing vessels. Then, we prepare for combat. But we prepare for combat against an enemy unlike any we have faced before. As the Zilithian fleet began its desperate acceleration toward home space, Veltar made a decision that would have seemed impossible hours earlier. For the first time in 1,000 years of galactic dominance, the Zilithian Empire was in full retreat from a supposedly inferior species. Behind them, the human fleet continued its pursuit, 68 ships carrying the combined fury of every human parent in the galaxy. They came not as soldiers following orders, but as predators protecting their young. And every Zilithian in the Harvester fleet was beginning to understand the fundamental error their species had made. They had tried to make prey of humanity's children. Now they were about to learn why humans had never been prey at all. The final confrontation began in the emptiness between stars, where the alien Harvester fleet found itself trapped between advancing human forces and the cold mathematics of physics. Supreme Commander Veltar watched his tactical display with growing despair as his ship's engines began failing under the strain of maximum acceleration. Behind them, the human fleet continued its relentless pursuit, their vessels pushing far beyond safe operational limits with the reckless determination of parents fighting for their children. Supreme Commander, Fleet Coordinator Zeth Khan reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Engine failures are cascading through the fleet. 17 vessels have lost primary propulsion. We cannot maintain current velocity. Veltar studied the display, showing his once mighty harvester fleet limping through space like wounded animals. The humans had forced them into an impossible choice: stop and fight a battle they might not survive, or continue running until their ships tore themselves apart. The tactical situation was unlike anything in Zilithian military history. War Leader Nexthal, final assessment of combat capabilities. The war leader's form had contracted with anxiety. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. Supreme Commander, our vessels retain superior firepower and defensive systems. However, combat projections must account for berserkers' psychological states among human crews. If they ignore standard survival protocols, they will, Veltar stated with grim certainty. The humans have made their intentions clear. They consider this battle worth any sacrifice. As if summoned by his words, a new transmission reached them from the pursuing fleet. Admiral Rebecca Torres' voice filled the command center, carrying cold determination that made even experienced Zilithian warriors uncomfortable. Alien fleet, this is your final warning. Return our people immediately or face total destruction. We will accept no terms, no negotiations, no compromises. You took human children, and for that crime, your species will pay in blood and fire. Veltar found himself struggling with concepts foreign to Zilithian thinking. How could a species commit military suicide for emotional attachments? How could they maintain absolute confidence in victory when facing overwhelming odds? The humans seemed to operate by psychological principles that defied everything the Zilithians understood about intelligent behavior. Supreme Commander, came Harvest Commander Kelnotha's voice from the lead prisoner ship. The human specimens have become increasingly agitated. They somehow know their military forces are approaching. How is this possible? Communication with the specimens is blocked. Unknown, Supreme Commander. But they're preparing for something. The adult prisoners have organized themselves into combat formations despite being restrained. Most disturbing, the specimens with military backgrounds are teaching combat techniques to the civilians. On the bridge of the prisoner ship, Sarah Chun felt the vibrations through the hull that told her everything she needed to know. The ship's engines were straining, acceleration patterns were erratic, and the ambient stress levels among their captors had increased dramatically. The human fleet had found them. Around her, the other prisoners had felt it too. Former soldiers were sharing what they knew about alien ship layouts with civilian colonists. Parents were teaching their children to stay low during combat. Everyone was preparing for a battle they might not survive, but that they knew was worth fighting. Maya, Sarah whispered to her daughter, whose eyes still held that terrible vacancy from the alien mind control device. Can you hear me, baby? Really hear me? For just a moment, something flickered in Maya's expression. A flash of recognition of the bright, curious girl she had been before the aliens stole her mind. Then, the device reasserted control, and the child's face became blank again. But it was enough. Sarah had seen her daughter in there, trapped but still fighting. Whatever the aliens had done, they hadn't destroyed Maya completely. There was still someone to save. Listen to me, all of you, Sarah called out to the other prisoners. When this ship starts taking damage, when the aliens are distracted, we move. We get to the children's section, and we protect them with our lives. Every parent here has the same job. Keep the kids alive until our people can get us out. The response was immediate and absolute. Every adult in the holding area nodded their agreement, their faces showing the same deadly determination that had consumed the pursuing fleet. The aliens had created something they didn't understand. A unified force of human parents with nothing left to lose. In the depths of space, the distance between the fleets continued to shrink. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the alien ships grow larger on her tactical display. Around her, the bridge crew worked with focused intensity, preparing weapons systems and coordinating with the rest of the fleet. All ships reporting ready for combat operations, Commander Singh announced. Fleet formation optimal for maximum engagement effectiveness. Rebecca studied the alien vessels ahead, noting their superior size and technology. Under normal circumstances, engaging such a force would be military suicide. But these weren't normal circumstances, and this wasn't a normal battle. This was a fight for humanity's children, and every person in her fleet understood what that meant. Admiral Chun, status of Third Fleet. Marcus Chen's voice came back immediately, rocksteady despite the personal stakes. All ships ready, Rebecca. David's boys on that lead ship, and we're bringing him home. Admiral Morrison, Second Fleet status. We're ready to show these things what human parents are capable of, came the response from the Second Fleet commander. Every mother and father in this fleet is behind you. Rebecca took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 40,000 human lives and the future of her species resting on the next few hours. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They had assumed that threatening children would make humans more cautious, more willing to negotiate to avoid casualties. They had created the opposite effect. They had turned humanity's entire military force into a weapon with a single purpose: kill anything that threatened their young. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. We're going to engage the alien fleet in exactly 12 minutes. I want every crew member to understand what we're fighting for. Those ships ahead of us contain 40,000 human civilians, including thousands of children who are probably terrified and calling for their parents right now. Her voice carried across 68 ships, reaching every human military officer who had abandoned their posts to join this desperate mission. We're not just rescuing prisoners today. We're sending a message to every species in the galaxy. Human children are not acceptable targets. Anyone who threatens our young ones will face the full wrath of human military power, regardless of their technological advantages or numerical superiority. The acknowledgments came back from every ship, voices tight with controlled fury and absolute determination. Rebecca could feel the collective rage of thousands of human parents focused into a single devastating weapon. Engagement range in 10 minutes, Commander Singh reported. Alien fleet is attempting to maintain distance, but their engine failures are preventing effective evasion. On the alien command ship, Supreme Commander Veltar was discovering the fatal flaw in Zilithian military doctrine. Their entire strategic philosophy was based on technological superiority and rational threat assessment. They had never faced an enemy that considered survival secondary to mission completion. War leader, initiate combat protocols. All ships prepare for engagement. Supreme Commander, Nexthal replied, his voice hollow with dawning realization. Our psychological warfare specialists report complete ineffectiveness against human forces. They appear immune to standard intimidation and demoralization tactics. Then, we rely on superior firepower. But, even as he spoke, Veltar knew something fundamental had changed in this battle. The approaching humans weren't fighting for territory, resources, or political advantage. They were fighting for their children, and that made them the most dangerous enemy the Zilithian Empire had ever faced. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness between stars. Alien energy weapons, designed to cripple enemy ships while preserving valuable salvage, lanced out toward the human fleet. But the human response was unlike anything the Zilithians had ever encountered. Instead of defensive maneuvering to minimize casualties, the human ships accelerated directly toward their attackers. Instead of attempting to preserve their vessels for strategic withdrawal, they concentrated all power to weapons and shields, abandoning engine safety protocols entirely. Instead of rational tactical behavior, they fought like predators that had been backed into a corner. The result was catastrophic for the Zilithian fleet. Human weapons, crude by alien standards, but effective at close range, began tearing through Zilithian hulls as the human ships closed distance with suicidal determination. Alien vessels that should have been able to destroy multiple human ships found themselves overwhelmed by opponents who ignored damage to their own vessels and continued attacking until their ships were nothing but burning wreckage. Impossible! War leader Nexthal screamed as another Zilithian harvester exploded under human fire. They're not attempting to preserve their own forces. This is military insanity. No, Veltar realized with growing horror. This is what happens when you threaten a predator species' offspring. The human ship Indomitable, its hull scarred by alien weapons, but its guns still firing, had broken through the Zilithian defensive line and was heading directly for the lead prisoner transport. Behind it, more human vessels followed, their crews fighting with the desperate fury of parents who would rather die than let their children remain in alien hands. On the prisoner ship, Sarah felt the impact as human weapons began hitting their captor's vessel. The alien guards were becoming increasingly agitated, their attention divided between monitoring prisoners and responding to combat damage. It was the opportunity she had been waiting for. "Now," she shouted to the other prisoners, "get those restraints off and get to the children." What followed was a scene of calculated chaos as dozens of former soldiers, miners, farmers, and colonists used every skill they possessed to break free from alien restraints and fight their way through the ship. They had no weapons except their desperation and their absolute refusal to let their children remain in alien hands. The Zilithian guards, faced with prisoners who fought with suicidal determination, found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy they had never trained to combat. Human parents protecting their young. In the children's section, Sarah found Maya still secured in her restraint pod, the mind control device still clamped around her small head. With hands that shook from rage and fear, Sarah began working to remove the alien technology from her daughter's skull. "Mama." Maya's voice was weak, confused, but wonderfully, beautifully real. "Mama, where are we?" "We're going home, baby," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held her daughter for the first time in days. "We're going home." Around them, the battle for the prisoner's ship continued. Human parents fought with everything they had while outside. Human warships systematically destroyed the Zilithian harvester fleet. Ship by ship, the alien vessels were reduced to burning debris as humanity's military might focused into a single overwhelming assault. On the Zilithian command ship, Supreme Commander Veltar watched his empire's greatest harvesting operation disintegrate under human fury. 2/3 of his fleet was already destroyed, his remaining ships were crippled, and the humans showed no signs of stopping their attack until every alien vessel was eliminated. "Supreme Commander," Fleet Coordinator Zethkin reported, his voice barely a whisper, "the humans are demanding our complete surrender. They want all prisoners returned immediately and all surviving crew to submit for trial." Veltar looked at his tactical display, seeing the burning remains of what had been the Zilithian Empire's most powerful fleet. The humans had achieved something no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had completely destroyed a Zilithian harvesting operation through sheer determination and superior motivation. "Signal surrender," he said finally. "Return all human prisoners immediately." "Supreme Commander, the High Command will consider this a catastrophic failure of Imperial policy." "The High Command was wrong about human capabilities," Veltar replied. "We all were." As the surviving alien ships powered down their weapons and began transferring human prisoners back to the rescue fleet, Admiral Rebecca Torres felt something she hadn't experienced in her decades of military service. Not just victory, but the satisfaction of knowing that humanity had sent an unmistakable message to the galaxy. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres," she announced to the fleet. "Mission accomplished. Every human civilian has been recovered. Every child is going home." The cheers that echoed across the communication channels came from the hearts of thousands of human parents who had risked everything to save children they might never meet. It was the sound of a species that had just learned something important about itself. When human children were threatened, there was no force in the galaxy that could stop humanity from protecting them. In the weeks that followed, word of the battle spread across known space. The Zilithian Empire, faced with the complete destruction of their harvesting fleet and the loss of their technological advantage, sued for peace and agreed never again to enter human space. Other species, watching from the safety of their own star systems, took careful note of humanity's response to threats against their young. A new law was written into galactic civilization that day, inscribed in burning alien ships, and rescued human children. Never threaten human offspring. Because when you attack human children, you don't just fight human soldiers. You fight human parents, and human parents don't stop until their children are safe or their enemies are dead. Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the rescue ship, holding Maya in her arms while they watched the alien prisoner ships being escorted away by human warships. Her daughter was free, her mind her own again, chattering excitedly about the rescue and asking a million questions about the battle. "Mama," Maya said suddenly, looking up with bright, curious eyes, "why did those aliens think they could take us away from you?" Sarah smiled, thinking about 40,000 rescued humans and a galaxy that now understood humanity's true nature. Because they didn't understand what human families are willing to do for each other, baby. But they do now. Behind them, the human fleet began its journey home, carrying rescued civilians and a message that would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity had announced its presence among the stars, not as explorers or diplomats, but as the galaxy's most dangerous predators when their young were threatened. And that was a lesson the galaxy would never forget.